fucking stupid ass goddamn camera. Get another fucking camera. This is ridiculous. I throw out all that But a Bibb Suicidalists! Here we are on another beautiful Friday morning, or afternoon, or evening, or maybe it's not even Friday where you're at. The point is, hello. I missed you guys. I missed you so much, in fact, that I'm bringing you a gift this week in the form of a new review. This week, we're going to take a look at the horror comedy spoof send-up Hell Baby from directors Robert Ben Garant and Thomas Lennon. But first, and I mean it this time, the podcastness. So we are reaching the end of the summer movie season. We're beginning to see the end as the last of the summer movies roll out. And because of this, there just hasn't been anything really cool coming into theaters. I haven't seen a whole lot of cool trailers to talk about in the last few weeks in a hotness segment, and that trend is not likely to change anytime soon. So right here is where I would feature a trailer, something that I thought was really cool that I want to pass on to you because you might think is cool as well. So this week, instead of a trailer, I want to introduce you to a podcast that I kind of caught wind of this week, and I have been binging on it. I may actually be one of the last people in the world who has any interest in this who might have found out about it. It is called How Did This Get Made? And it sings a pretty familiar tune. Like, if you're watching this show right now, chances are this is a podcast you're going to be into. It is a podcast dedicated to dissecting really bad movies. It features comedian Paul Scheer and his wife June Diane Raphael and their co-host, the frequently exasperated Jason Matsukas. And then there's usually a fourth guest who changes from week to week, and it's very, very interesting. They feature the usual suspects of bad movies, like they have an episode dedicated to The Room where the actor who plays Mark turns up to talk about what it was like to make The Room with Tommy Wiseau. There's an episode for Birdemic, which actually features Whitney Moore, who played Natalie in Birdemic, talking about what it was like making a movie with James Nguyen. There's also an episode dedicated to like Old Dogs. There's one about burlesque, like big budgeted Hollywood movies that really ought to have known better. One of the most recent ones, the one that I caught wind of, is an actual look into what it's like making a bad movie. I mean, frequently in recent episodes they've been kind of getting into this, where in the past the whole thing has been sort of just like ragging on these movies and just kind of trying to break them down and make sense of them. But recent episodes, like a Crocodile Dundee 3 episode, actually brings in one of the writers of Crocodile Dundee 3, who talks about what it was like, what an ordeal it was to work with Paul Hogan, who, spoiler alert, turns out to be a really terrible human being and takes douchebaggy behavior to a whole new level. So I'm going to put the link down in the description like I do with everything, and you're going to check it out because I think you're going to love it. Just make some time for it. It's very, very funny. So now, on with the review. Here's Hell Baby. Jack and Vanessa are a pair of yuppies who buy a really shitty house in a really bad neighborhood in New Orleans. It just so happens that it's the kind of house that has a reputation for being the kind of place where people die often. Now, Jack and Vanessa have some kind of plan to either flip the house or start a family there, or both. It's never entirely clear. But they're made aware of the house's bad reputation by friend Nell, who is a local dude who doesn't seem to have his own house. He's always squatting in theirs or sneaking around. He's just always kind of there. Not long after, Vanessa, who is very, very pregnant, also becomes possessed of a demon of some sort. And when an unbelievably demented Mrs. Nussbaum begins terrorizing Jack as well, this is when the bodies begin dropping at an alarming rate. Now, the only way to stop the demon and save the baby is to call on the Vatican's most elite exorcist team to come down and deal with the problem. And I guess a couple of cops in New Orleans who really know how to party. Hell Baby stars Rob Corddry and Leslie Bibb, and basically anybody who has ever had a guest starring spot on Parks and Recreations or The Office. This movie comes from directors Thomas Lennon and Robert Ben Garant, who you may know as key players and writers on Reno 911 and MTV's The State, basically a billion other comedy projects that you've probably seen at one point or another. If you're familiar with Lennon and Garant, then get ready. This is basically fairly standard fare for them. It plays out like a horror movie directed by Lucio Fulci, as written by David and Jerry Zucker. If you don't know who any of those people are, that's fine. I will explain. Garant and Lennon subscribe to a certain school of comedy that embraces a kind of casual craziness. Every single scene in this movie is crazy and silly and ridiculous, and the zaniness is utterly off the charts. They just run wild with it. Everything is just kind of beyond stupid, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I happen to have an appreciation for comedy that is silly for silly's sake. Now, this movie is floated entirely on the comic prowess of its cast. I would watch Rob Corddry drink coffee for 20 minutes because I'm absolutely certain that he would be hilarious while doing it. I've been a fan of Rob Corddry since he was a correspondent on The Daily Show, and I'll watch anything that the guy is in. And usually he plays a certain kind of character. He plays the obnoxious asshole. Think of every movie you've ever seen with him. He plays that guy. Well, here he plays the straight guy. And he does it remarkably well. It's an unusual sort of role for him, and he carries it with precision and accuracy. He's really, really funny to watch throughout the whole thing. Backing him up is Leslie Bibb, who plays his wife. You may recognize Leslie Bibb from Trick or Treat as the Halloween-hating wife. Well, here she is called upon to play an utter psychopath, and I won't lie, she does a very, very good job of it. But practically stealing the entire show is Keegan-Michael Key, whose character, Fresnel, is a sort of frequent home invader. He's not supposed to be there, but he always is. He's in practically every scene, and he nearly carries the entire picture by himself. He just about walks away with the whole thing. He's utterly, utterly hilarious. Paul Scheer and Rob Hubel both show up as a pair of cops who seem to float a recurring gag throughout the entire picture as people lovingly devour po' boy sandwiches. And for whatever reason, for reasons I am still trying to work out, every time they did this joke, I thought it was fucking hilarious. It's a series of quick, rapid cuts of people just destroying these sandwiches. One final note about the cast, Ricky Lindholm. Holy shit. If the movie falters anywhere, it's in the sketch-driven script. This is what Garant and Lennon are used to. It's really their turf. This works on a show like Reno 911, where the cast tends to be a little bigger, and where they're not really telling a single story in a single episode. It's just a bunch of situations and circumstances that all kind of come together around a single idea. But here, it's a single movie. They're telling one story with a much smaller cast. And they're doing it through a series of very, very funny sketches, but it seems to jump around a little bit, and none of the scenes tend to mesh very well. It just doesn't really seem to come together around this central story. But the objective here was actually to spoof haunted house and exorcist movies, and as far as I'm concerned, mission accomplished. It is very, very funny, and it knows the source material. In terms of theme and tone, it's actually highly reminiscent of comedic horror movies from the 80s, like the grotesquely underrated Joe Dante picture, The Burbs. Hell Baby isn't really much of a horror movie, but it never was meant to be a horror movie to begin with. But for a movie that's not much of a horror movie, it is gory as hell. I mean, everybody who winds up surviving the movie's final ordeal, the final showdown, winds up like covered in blood, and Michael Ian Black is like crucified and graphically disemboweled. You also get an extended vomiting scene, and if I hadn't made my point clear before, holy crap, Ricky Lindholm. So you get near non-stop laughs, a ton of gore, a series of loving tributes to the po' boy sandwich, and a metric fuck ton of nudity in this movie. What is not to love? Make sure you check it out, especially if you love laughs with your demonic possession. So have you seen Hell Baby? I want to know. Let me know what your opinion of it was down in the comments. And also if there's anything else that you would like to see reviewed, anything you think I need to keep an eye on, make sure you let me know down in the comments. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. And if you haven't already, please take a minute to check out my Patreon profile and consider becoming a patron of Cinema Suicide. Also, follow the Tumblr. We have a good time over there. Both of them linked down in the descriptions. As always, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you Friday.